We've had some really big plays in the first 5 games of the 2024 season. What have been the biggest? What have been our favorites? We'll discuss. Let us know your favorites coming up on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Jay, what has been one of your favorite plays of the season?
Man, there's a long list of actually really good plays that we've seen this year. If I got to pick one on the offensive side of the ball, the one that really just jumped out to me the most is still that J.J. Hester catch deep, right? We've been just fiending for a big play to happen, something to just jump out and, really get us excited that, the defense is starting to see some progression. And we hadn't seen a bunch. We've seen some solid ones. I mean, of course, we just talked about Bauer Sharp's great catch across the middle and catch and run that we thought was going to be something to be a game changer, and it got called back. So we haven't had anything that actually stuck. And then Michael Hawkins chills in the pocket, sits there, launches it to J.J. Hester. We gave J.J. Hester the opportunity, and guess what? He came through. So now I feel like the confidence is there. There's no excuse not to go to him deep more, especially with his size and speed. I mean, he outran that Auburn corner. And Lee is one of their best ones, right? He's one of their better corners, and he couldn't keep up. He was able to once he was able to try to get a little bit closer, he wasn't able to fully suck him up, but he got that dive and was able to grab his legs to stop the play. But there's even a chance that because Hawkins hit him in stride, he almost had a chance of going all the way. So that to me was the big play that jumped out to me that really got me excited. What about you?
Yeah, for me, man, I got to go to Tennessee. Fourth quarter, Michael Hawkins and the Sooners are trying to make some things happen, trying to make some magic happen late in that game. He came into the game down 16, an unenviable position to be in. First real taste of college football against a really good Tennessee defense. But in the fourth quarter, he starts getting stuff going. He and the offense start getting stuff going. They're down near the goal line, and he scrambles towards the end zone. He takes that big leap up into the air to try and get into the end zone for the touchdown. Gets helicoptered just like he did against Auburn, but lands short. That was the play that everybody decided he was QB1.
Yes.
Kirk Herbstreit, I'm sure Brent Venables, I'm sure Joe John Finley and Seth Luttrell, they saw the heart, the hustle, and the effort that he provided in that moment and said, I've seen enough. He gets to start against Auburn.
So,
I mean, has he been perfect in his 6+ quarters of action? No, but he's a true freshman that's getting better and better every time he steps on the field. But one thing you don't have to question about Michael Hawkins is the grit and the determination to go make a play in a key moment of a game. And though he fell inches short against Tennessee, he was not against Auburn. And his helicopter 2-point conversion was huge in that game because it goes from a 1-point lead to a 3-point lead. And it puts a little bit more pressure on Auburn because you have to tie. You have to kick a field goal to tie. And we saw how their kicking situation was. So a big play for him. And I think it was one of those plays that just galvanized the whole program and made it really easy to follow Michael Hawkins.
Yeah, and there was actually one other play, too, that he did that I think he doesn't get credit for, but it still was really cool. Like, he pulled out the Patrick Mahomes throw on while he's, parallel to the ground. Right. Yeah. A lot of people forget that. It was on the 2-point conversion. He was scrambling and realized he wasn't going to make it. They tried to tackle him. He tripped up, jumped, and he threw it literally sidearmed. And honestly, if Bauer Sharp had kept running across the backside of the field, he was going to catch that and get that 2-point conversion. Yep. He didn't. So, of course, he slowed up, and then he tried to jump up and ended up, literally touching his hands as it hit the ground.
Right.
But him being able to do that while parallel to the ground, absurd. And that tells you just how talented the kid is. All
right, so tell me defensively, what's been your favorite play of the first 5 games?
It's crazy because there were so many really good ones. And of course, the biggest one is probably one a lot of people are going to say in the comments. So we want to hear from y'all. If you're on the watching us on YouTube, definitely jump in the comments and tell us your favorite one. But to me, honestly, it was the Robert Spears Jennings strip sack. Well, the hit sack that he did on Nico Yamaleava. Mm-hmm. I love that play dial up. We did it 2 weeks in a row. First, we did it to Nico and hit him. And I keep telling everybody, man, Tennessee got lucky because as soon as Nico's elbow went back, he hit a helmet. There had been a good chance of something being broken if Robert Spears Jennings hit him harder. That one was big. And then, of course, he did it again against Auburn. They dialed up the sack, and he came untouched a second time. And bah! Hit that boy. And that, to me, is just massive, right? Just that the fact that Zach Alley trusts him to be able to run that and just dialing it up at the right time to where he literally came through untouched. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was another part of a game against Tennessee where you're not really moving the ball very well. You had the field goal drive, but that was about it. Yeah. And then you come up with that big play and give the offense the ball inside or at the 5-yard line. I mean, that was a huge play in the game. And unfortunately, the turnover happens and Tennessee gets the ball back the very next play. But I mean, that could have very easily been a play of the game if Oklahoma was able to go and score in that moment, but they weren't. So I'm going to go with Kip Lewis, man. The Kip 6, the interception return for a touchdown, going 63 yards to basically beat Auburn. I mean, that was the go-ahead score in that game, and it potentially saved Oklahoma's season. Oklahoma loses that game and they drop to 3-2 instead of 4-1. And with the schedule that Oklahoma's got over the final 7 games of the season, it's looking rough, man. It's going to be a challenge to get to 8 wins. It might even be a challenge to get to bowl eligibility, which is crazy to think of, but there are a lot of tough games remaining and you could not afford to drop a game against Auburn. But with the way everything had kind of been going offensively, you weren't sure if that drive, the touchdown drive you got on the Michael Hawkins to JJ Hester play, is that going to open everything up for you offensively, or is that just kind of like a one-off? You didn't really have many scoring drives in that game, but to be able to get a pick 6, a defensive touchdown, which we said going into the game was going to be key for Oklahoma to get a win.
Turnovers were critical, and you got it in a critical moment. So the Kip Lewis, man, I don't think we're going to be able to underestimate how important that was. And that's going to be one of those plays, I think, that lives on for a very long time, much like the Nick Bonito, got the interception or dropped the interception. The very next play gets the interception against Baylor to complete that comeback. It's going to be one of those defensive plays that gets remembered kind of like the Superman play, Roy Williams and Teddy Lehman, converting on the interception. I mean, again, maybe not as big of a game in our minds, Oklahoma-Auburn, but the first SEC road trip, a game that you were trailing, and you come up with that play, it's huge. And maybe I'm living in the moment. Maybe I'm living with recency bias, but it just feels like one of those plays that's kind of in that upper echelon of defensive plays that will get remembered for a long time. No, I agree. It feels like it's one of those that it's gonna be in Sooner lore for all of eternity. It's gonna be a play that everybody's gonna talk about. Where were you?
Right.
Where were you when Kip Lewis got his Kip 6
to
win the first road game in the SEC and get your first SEC win? Where were you? That's we're gonna talk about that forever.
Yeah, like that's going to be bookmarked and added to the big highlight packages they get together for every season to talk about Oklahoma going into the season. That's going to be part of the history of Oklahoma because of that play. Just a huge, huge moment. They ended up ultimately giving Oklahoma the win. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. The show on all the social media platforms is at Locked On Sooners. So go follow us wherever you like to do social media stuff. We're going to be back next week. We'll have so much to say about OU Texas. We'll have our crossover with the folks over at Locked On Longhorns, which will be quite fun, I'm sure. They'll have a lot to say. I can already imagine. If you follow me on Twitter, you've already seen some of those interactions. But we'll have plenty to get you ready for the Red River Showdown next weekend. And I'm sure that line's going to move and get a little bit closer to Oklahoma as the days go by. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer.
Sooner.